Good morning, by the way. I don't know. Are you a morning person? Are you a
Yeah,
evening person? I'm
no,
sure.
I'm a morning person. I've always been a morning person. I don't use alarms or anything, so
Oh,
I I enjoy the mornings.
do
How about
you?
you?
Um, I'm way more of a morning person than an evening person, and my wife is way more of an evening person than a morning person. So of course,
Mm.
like it's an odd combination. But
Yeah.
um, do you do most of your training in the morning then, or just you get it done during the day?
Um, I don't know. Usually I probably start riding at maybe 9 or 10 o'clock or so. So not super early, but I can kind of ride whenever I want. And I'd rather not ride when it's cold in the morning. So
Yeah, no kidding.
yeah.
Are you? I mean, you're East Coast. You're like Asheville area or North
hmm
Carolina, right?
Yeah, Brevard, North Carolina. It's 30 minutes outside of Asheville.
Okay,
Um,
so great riding over there for sure.
yeah, I think it's the best riding on the East Coast, honestly. Um,
I
so
I
I'm spoiled.
did. Let's see, 2021 BWR North Carolina,
Oh,
and that
nice.
was I think it
Yeah.
was 21. Yeah, and actually, I was really looking forward to there wasn't really single track per se, I don't think, on that route, but I was looking forward to like the gravel roads, the back roads, but then I was blown away by the paved roads and how nice they
hmm
were, and that was probably
Yeah.
the most fun um, I had was ripping down some of those paved descents. It was pretty incredible for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of good road riding around here. I mean, a lot of good gravel riding, a lot of good mountain bike riding. Last year's version of BWR actually had even it had more. I don't think there was any. Was there any single track in 2021?
If you call like the finish, remember like we kind of went just to get back to the finishing shoot or whatever. You kind of
Yeah,
had maybe 200 meters of
right.
of single track.
Sure. Well, there was a lot more last year, and I'm assuming there's going to be a lot more this year. It was probably the most single track I've ever seen in a BWR race last year. Um,
A BWR race at all, like even
yeah,
even
I mean,
San Diego or
yeah, including San Diego, including the Utah one. I mean, they added a ton of single track
holy
for
cow.
the 2022 race. It was a completely different race. I mean, my race time in 2021 was maybe 4:45 or 4:50 or something, and then my race time in 2022 was I don't know 7 hours or something
Oh,
something like that.
jeez.
So
7 hours. Um, well, they also, I remember they like cut a ton of mileage, like really on the last minute.
yeah,
So it was like,
yeah.
it ended up being like 90 plus miles instead of 120 or something. So that
Yeah.
was, so even more single track than, did you do Utah last year?
hmm
That
No,
whole,
I didn't do it. I didn't do it last year. I did it the year before that.
okay, I think it was a pretty similar course though.
Yeah.
Because there,
It was more single track than that.
wow, man. Of course, they put for Utah, they put it all like right at the end, so you're pretty
hmm
trashed already, and then you have to go through this single track section. Uh, well, cool. So
Yeah.
no whiskey off road for you. Have you done that before? Or
I don't think I have done whiskey. And yeah, I kind of over raced a bit last year, so I was trying not to over race again this year. And so extra races like that are not part of the Grand Prix that require a lot of traveling, I kind of cut out.
yeah, I'm surprised and not surprised at how many repeated names I saw from Sea Otter to whiskey. It's just like they just went south a little bit and and uh,
hmm
and race, but just yeah, like back to back.
Yeah.
It's got to be a little brutal, I guess. But um,
Yeah, I mean those guys do back to back big weekends like that all the time. I mean, I think there are even some of them who did
oh
BWR,
right, yeah.
Then Sea Otter, then Whiskey. So 3 weekends back to
Jeez,
back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, if you don't mind, we could just kind of jump into it.
Mhm.
No like real intro. I'll do the, you know, the true introduction or whatever myself off the conversation. But yeah, I was hoping, and we're I don't know like a week out of it now. So I'm sorry if you're tired of talking about it or thinking about it too much, but I was hoping to talk with someone about Sea Otter and the race and how it went for them. And I raced it
Mhm.
as well. I did the XL as well, and it was pretty gnarly in my experience. But
Yeah.
um, but then yeah, reaching out to you, I was like, man, this would be a perfect opportunity. So yeah, let's if you don't mind, let's chat a little bit about Sea Otter. I mean, I think it
Yeah,
would
for
be
sure. For
yeah.
sure.
First off, I'm wondering because Sea Otter is, of course, not just the race itself. It is like a 4 day bike festival, and
Mhm.
um, for a lot of people like myself, um, I had duties to attend to at our booth at KOM Cycling's booth, and I'm on my feet all day, and I'm talking to people all day, and it's not necessary. I'm not getting able to ride much beforehand, so it's not really the best race prep, but it's also just the name of the game when you're at Sea Otter. For you, how early did you get there, and did you have a lot of like sponsorship obligations to do? And was it as busy for you as I'm assuming it was, like it was for me leading up to the race?
Yeah, I was busy for sure. There was a lot of sponsorship stuff to do there. I booked most of my sponsorship obligations on Thursday so that I would have Friday before the race on Saturday to just do my pre-ride and chill. Although to be honest, Friday ended up being a full day too with Lifetime Grand Prix stuff. And I think we were out at the venue for probably 6 or 7 hours on Friday as well. So it's
Oh
not like
gosh.
Friday. It's not like Friday was a quick day, and it doesn't seem like anything really happens quickly at Sea Otter, other than the racing. Uh, it's just even getting from the parking area to the
Oh
course
God.
and
Yeah.
figuring out the course, and then if you've got to be at a certain booth, finding the booth in the sea of booths
Oh my
at the
God.
venue is insane. So yeah, I mean it can be a little bit of a stressful weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, there's not like a ton of places to sit down, so it is like you're always on your feet. Luckily, it wasn't. I remember last year it being like ridiculously hot at the early
Mm-hmm.
part of the whole deal, but it was warm, but not. It was sunny, but not terribly warm. So it's not like we're sweating our
Yeah.
butts off the whole time. But I do I mean, I'm guessing it's kind of like a give and take with the sponsorship obligations because they want you to do well, but also the reason you're there is to promote their their brands.
Right.
So it's kind of like, are they cool with you saying no? I gotta make sure and take care of Dylan here, or they're like, no, this is what we brought you out for. So
Yeah.
come in and get your picture taken or something.
It depends on the sponsor. I would say that most sponsors are cool with you looking after yourself before a race. Although I was having this exact conversation with Kerry Warner
Hmm.
because Bike Flights is not only a sponsor of his, but I believe that he actually works for Bike Flights. So he has to man the booth the entire time at the expo, for multiple days before the race, and he has to be on his feet all that whole time,
Yeah.
and then he has to race well. And I was like, man, you'd probably do better at the race if you weren't you know manning the booth for so long. And he's like, oh yeah, it's uh I don't know, they don't care about that or whatever.
Well,
It kind of blew my mind because I was like, man, Bike Flights would really get a lot of publicity if Kerry Warner got on the podium or something. um, and by making him stand at this booth all day, they're lowering the chances that he does that. So yeah, I mean it is a give and take, I guess, and it really depends on the sponsor.
yeah, I myself I started to feel guilty leading up to race day because it kind of dawned on me that I was going to be out there for. damn near 6 hours, which I was. and and then I'm like, oh man, I'm really kind of not doing my duties at the booth. Like that's basically, I think by the time it started, we started like 9:30, or close to that with in the age group wave I was in. And then by the time I cleaned up and was done, it was like, well, it's time to go home, guys.
Mhm.
So I felt a little guilty about being away from the booth so much, but luckily I had a good crew that manned it while I was there. But cool, yeah. And did you? Well, of course, like you raced last year.
Mhm.
It was similar course, but a little different, right?
Yeah, so last year, obviously, the course was shorter. I think it was only 80K. And then this year, they advertised it as 100K, but it was longer than 100K. I think it
Yeah.
was maybe 110K or something like that.
What was your what? Sorry to interrupt, but what was your elevation at the end of the day? Do you remember?
Oh, man, I want to say it was 8 or 9,000 feet.
Yeah, mine was 9 plus, which I was not
Yeah,
expecting 9 plus, and
yeah.
like seven, like it was just under 70 miles, but
It's a surprising amount of climbing. You don't, you're driving around in that area and it's hilly, but you don't see any mountains.
right.
And you do that race and it's a surprising amount of climbing. Yeah. And the other difference I would say with last year's course to this year's course, so that of course they added some stuff onto the lap. They added a little bit of single track, and I think they added some gravel sections at the end of the lap.
Wasn't that whole
But
sand stuff at the end? There was like this whole sandy mess, and I don't remember that
yeah,
from last year. Was that all
no, I
added?
don't. I think that was added as well.
Uh,
That basically sand pit climb. I
yeah,
don't I don't remember that being in
yeah,
there.
me neither.
But it seemed like the course was a lot bumpier this year, and I think
Yeah.
it's because of all the rain they'd
Mm-hmm.
had. I rode a full suspension last year, and this year, I was kind of going back and forth. Should I do hardtail? Should I do full suspension? Ended up bringing the full suspension, and I was pretty glad that I did because when I pre-rode the course, I was thinking, yeah, this is bumpier than last year, and last year I rode a full suspension, thought it was a good choice. So this is the right choice.
Yeah, like right out of the gate, as soon as you dump into that single track, that's the first thing I noticed. I mean, that
Mhm.
was able to pre-ride just a little bit, and um, but I was able to get that first bit of single track, and I was like, holy cow, this is way bumpier than I remember. And
Mhm.
I made the mistake of last year signing up for the gravel race, and
Yeah.
I brought, I I did all this work bringing a gravel bike out there, and then I
Hmm.
pre-rode the course last year, like part of the course last year. I'm like, what was I thinking? This is this is not a gravel
Hmm.
race. And so I raced the gravel race last year on a borrowed full suspension mountain bike, and I did pretty
Hmm.
well. But so this year I brought my full suspension mountain bike as well, and it was a much better choice for sure.
Did you end up doing the gravel race too, or just the
No, no, I
XL?
did the Fuego XL this year.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
I kind of not last year was my first Sea Otter, the first thing and first experience, and I think they want to have a gravel offering,
Hmm.
uh, obviously, but I quickly realized last year, no, this is a mountain bike event, and I want to
Yeah,
do the mountain bike event, so
yeah.
so I brought my full suspension this
There's
year.
not enough. There's not enough gravel roads at that venue to make a real gravel race. It would have to be a very short lap and then multiple laps if they wanted to make it a true gravel race that was just 100% gravel, I think.
Right. Yeah, and you have to use like the single track to connect to those gravel roads anyways. So,
Yeah.
um, and then this year's gravel race, last year's was only one lap, and then this year's
Hmm.
looked like it was pretty close to what we did for the
Yeah.
XL, except they did kind of do a couple different single track sections. But I can't believe, yeah, I don't know. I'm so glad I didn't ride even a
Yeah.
even a hardtail. I mean, some of those downhills I thought were pretty gnarly, so I'm glad that I had the full suspension for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Same boat.
Yeah. So, talk about your race a little bit. It seemed like it was fast. Like I can't believe how fast that was. I
Yeah.
thought I was, you know, I thought I was going pretty fast, and then to look at the difference in times, it's like, oh my god, you guys were flying. Um,
Yeah. So man, I've told this story about the start a number of times on different podcasts at this point, and just to people who've asked me about the race. And I'm going to tell it again when I make a YouTube video about the race, which I'll probably film either this afternoon or tomorrow. But I'll rehash it again here.
good,
So
good.
this was this is probably the dumbest thing that I've done in a race in a very long time. I mean, obviously I've done dumber things in races when I was a junior and I didn't know any better, but this was in my professional cycling career, this is like a complete rookie move. And I was, face palming as soon as I did it. Basically, so last year we went as hard as we possibly could from the second the gun went off until we hit the single track, right? It's
Yep.
XC style start,
Yep.
probably 2 minutes, as hard as you can possibly go up that first little climb on the racetrack. And the start is slightly different, but I would say that it was the same. It was probably the same distance because the start was a little further back on the track last year,
Yep.
and it was further up on the track this year, but the single track start was also further up on the track. So, yeah, last year, I mean, I just went as hard as I possibly could for 2 minutes, and I think I got into the single track maybe 20th last year, which isn't a terrible start. I ended up finishing 17th, so that's probably about where I should have slotted in. And so, the whole week leading up to the race, I'm like, man, you just got to put out your 2 minute max power. It's got to be, man, I was psyching myself up. Like I was warming up, psyching myself up, thinking you just got to do your 2 minute max as hard as you can for 2 minutes.
I'm really excited where this is going, actually.
That's what's going to make or break the race is this start. So you got to put everything out there on the start. All right, so fast forward to the start, and the gun goes off, and shockingly, no, I don't know. I guess the field just decided not to go all out for the first minute this year. I have no idea why, but I had it so in my head that I needed to put out my best 2 minute power on this start that I just sprinted past everyone, and I found myself off the front. I never looked back and saw the gap, but a friend of mine told me that I probably had, 10 or 15 meters on the entire field in the first 30 seconds of the race. Because I was just like, you got to sprint as hard as you can for 2 minutes. And I can't believe that no one got a picture or a video of it. I've seen so many pictures and videos of the start, and somehow nobody got a picture or video of me sprinting off the front. So I guess you're just going to have to take my word for it.
So did you get into the single track then first?
No. So this is why this ended up being such a mistake, is because this is about a 2 minute climb at the start. And I was probably off the front for about the first 90 seconds. And in the last 30 seconds, the peloton caught me. And I was so gassed from going so hard for 90 seconds that in that 30-second period, from when they caught me to when you hit the single track, I would say 40 to 50 guys passed me.
Oh my God.
In 30 seconds. And, it probably sounds crazy to somebody who doesn't race, but if you've ever road raced before, this isn't shocking to anyone. It's one guy off the front. As soon as he gets caught by the field, he's done.
Yeah,
know what I mean?
Absorbed by the whole group and then out the back.
Completely absorbed. So I wasn't quite out the back. I mean, there were 84 riders in that pro field, and I probably got in to the single track. I don't know. I would say 45th to 50th position.
Okay.
But it was a dumb move, obviously, because had I just stayed in the pack and started sprinting when everybody else started sprinting, I mean, at the very least, I might have been 20th or 30th like last year. So I was in a worse position because I did that. and I was pretty pissed at myself at the time. But it's a long race. It's a nearly 70-mile race. So, it's not the end of the day. And I kept picking riders off all day. In fact, I don't know that anybody from behind me passed me. I was just passing riders constantly. And I got a strong group that I got to work with, going on some of those gravel sections, at least for the first lap. Um, and in that first lap, I think I was passing a rider every 10 minutes. So it always feels good to be the rider passing people and not be the rider getting passed by people.
Yeah, for sure.
So
So maybe in
at
that,
least
yeah, in that sense, then you set yourself up better than the mental
right.
heartache of someone like all these people passing you
Hmm.
later in the
Yeah.
race.
So um, yeah. So then I think I ended up finishing 30th place, and and the year before I had finished 17th. So you look at those two results and you're like, oh man, it must have been a bad race. And I mean, I guess that's one way to look at it. But I dug into my power files, and I'll talk about all of this in the video I make. But I dug into my power files, and for the race last year took me just over 3 hours, like 3 hours and 4 minutes or something. And so last year, my normalized power for the 3 hour race, I think was 306 NP. This year, for the first 3 hours of this race, my normalized power was 304. And I still had an hour and a half
Oh God.
left to ride,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't a bad day. It wasn't a bad race. It wasn't a weaker race. If anything, I think I'm in better form now. It's just this is something that I keep saying over and over and over again, and people are probably tired of hearing me say it, but the competition at these gravel races and at these Lifetime Grand Prix races just keeps going up and up and up and up.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, there are
Yeah.
a lot of different things happening here. Different course to different terrain ish. It was. I thought the course was harder this year, but I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like you said, the competition is getting crazy fast,
Yeah.
and I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, but let's before we get to that, let's finish up the race itself. Was there anything? I What did you do about nutrition, and did you wear a pack, or did you just take bottle
Yeah.
hand ups and?
Yeah, so some people may have watched my recent wind tunnel gravel video where I talked about how shockingly wearing a USWE hydration pack was faster than not wearing it.
Yeah.
Not every hydration pack is faster. In fact, one of the packs that we tested, I think it was an Osprey pack, was actually slower. I think it just depends on the amount of pockets it has and the shape of the pack. But the USWE pack is a pretty aerodynamic shape, and and I'm not sponsored by USWE in any way. I paid full price for my USWE packs. I'm just saying it was faster on my body, um, at least according to the wind tunnel. So that kind of completely changed my mind about using a pack during racing. I used to try to avoid using a pack during racing, but I started with no pack, and I just had about maybe half a bottle of water, like not that much water. And the reason for that is because I wanted to be as light as possible for that first
Okay.
climb,
Oh,
that
interesting.
start. Yeah. And then the start didn't even end up going well, so it's not like it really mattered. but but and then at that first feed zone, I picked up a pack, and then at the second time around the feed zone, I switched that pack out with another pack. So I
Okay.
did
Okay.
half a bottle and then two packs, and both of those packs were filled up a little more than halfway. So about, I would say, maybe a liter and a quarter for each one of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and was that straight water, or did you have nutrition in the pack?
Yeah, I did. I don't drink straight water when I'm
Okay.
racing. I did flow formulas, and I think I had in that liter, let's call it 1,200 milliliters. I think I had 4 scoops of flow formulas, and then I was supplementing that with goo energy gels. So I would do about 2-ish goo energy gels per hour. And I think probably if you break that down, it was roughly 90 to 100 grams of carbohydrates per hour.
Okay. Yeah, that really puts a lot of pressure on. I mean, I don't know if you think this way or like your crew that's out there handing off your pack, but man, if you miss that pack or something goes wrong and it makes you stop, I mean, you're putting a lot of pressure on that moment to get that pack, and especially that early in the race too. Um,
Yeah.
and then, but I'm sure that a lot of people were changing out bottles or packs or whatever halfway through. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I mean, it is a lot of pressure. I think if I were to have missed that pack hand up, I can't just continue racing. I have to turn around and go
yeah,
get the pack. It's going to cost me 5 seconds, but if I miss the pack hand up, it's going to cost me 5 minutes and not having my nutrition.
yeah,
So at least maybe more. So, it is pressure, I guess. And we did the pack hand up very well. It didn't cost me anything getting the pack, but yeah, I think, uh, you know, some racers may be so in the moment that if they miss their bottle hand up or they miss their, getting some extra gels from the feed zone, they're like, oh, I'll just continue racing, hope for the best. That 5 seconds that it would have cost you to just turn around real quick and pick up your bottle that you missed, is going to save you, like I said, it's going to save you 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the race when you are dehydrated and underfueled.
yeah. Um, so I started with 2 bottles,
Mm-hmm.
with I think overall is like 560 calories in the bottles, which isn't a ton.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many carbs or whatever, but and and then I had another set of bottles,
What drink mix do you use?
Infinite Go Far.
Infinite. Okay.
Yeah.
So is it just, do you know if it's just carbohydrates or if it's like a mixture of carbohydrates and protein?
Man, that's a great question. I could go get it and we could talk about it.
It's okay. It's okay. I was just curious.
um, I think it's a mixture, but I'm
Okay.
not entirely sure.
Mhm.
But so I had those two, and I knew I had two more coming up, and so I kind of babied those for the first 2.5 hours, which was like the
Mhm.
first lap. And I think I probably, and I hadn't anything else either. Those are the only calories I had, no goos or anything. They said that this was a fully supported race, and that there would be that first aid
Mhm.
station would have gels and water and whatever. Which I didn't stop at the
Mhm.
first time around. Then got through the
Mhm.
first lap, took the bottles. So in the first 2.5 hours, I babied those 560 calories. In the next 10 minutes, I think I downed the next 560 cal. I just, I needed, I should have had more calories in me before, in that first lap.
Mhm.
And so I just downed those 2 bottles so quickly, and I was in a bad spot. But I also knew 10 miles up the road, there's that aid station.
Mhm.
Get to the aid station. Well, there was no nutrition, no food, no anything, just water. And then some
Yeah.
guy had like a protein bar that he's like, you can have this. It was disgusting. And then another person gave me a rice cake. Like what? What is that gonna do? So the basically the last, what is it, 20 miles or 25 miles, I
Mhm.
had the water and 60 calories from a rice cake, and that was about
Mhm.
it. It was I was not very happy, but whatever, I made it. But yeah, that's I probably should have planned a little better, although I do remember reading that they said that there would be nutrition at that aid station, and I was pretty bummed when
Yeah.
there wasn't.
I have come to learn that unless I know the race promoter and I know what they have at an aid station, I have come to learn to not rely on what the aid station is supposed to have at it. It
Yeah,
just
yeah, it's
screwed
definitely
me too many times.
yeah, it's definitely I feel like I was more upset at myself for not planning properly and thinking that I could get
Hmm.
away with it. But I needed more calories. It was more of a it just depleted me. I think the full sun and it was like creeping up towards like 70 degrees and I was sweating my ass off and I was just totally depleted by that. And
Yeah.
I think I pushed it really hard on the first lap and I'm like my legs feel good, so this is either a great sign or I'm gonna implode.
Hmm.
And I did kind of that first set of that single track and those punchy climbs at the beginning of the lap. Those are tough and those hurt the second time around. But luckily, some of those calories that I downed really quick kind of kicked
Hmm.
in, and then I was better. But the wind did pick up. Was it windy towards the end for you guys as well?
Yeah, I remember there being a little bit of wind. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was some good sections of we kind of do all that climbing, and then you're basically on a gravel road, and you can kind of just get in a good groove. And
Hmm.
but the second time through, it was basically wind in my face, and I just was having a hard time holding uh, a decent amount of speed at all. But
Hmm.
anyways, it was it was a good experience for me. I mean, it was
Yeah.
fun. I guess from my perspective, it's cool to talk to you about this because it it was fun to see all the pros take off and then myself have the same experience and do the same race and know that everyone else is doing the same race. So that was a I think that's the fun of like something like Sea Otter or Unbound or Mid South.
Yeah.
To be experiencing the same thing that everyone is experiencing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me ask you, what do you think of so this was a little bit of a controversy when Unbound announced that they were going to do a separate pro and amateur start.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they had a separate pro and amateur start at Sea Otter.
Yep.
What do you think about that? Do you think that these races they should have a separate pro start or should everybody just start together?
It didn't bother me at Sea Otter.
Hmm.
Um, I had no business starting, and of course, like I would have been way in the back and stuff would
Hmm.
have sorted itself out. Um, but yeah, I don't think it bothers me very much.
Hmm.
Um, I think those starts get kind of scary and too crowded, and then you have people that have no business being up front that shouldn't be up front, and then it
Yeah.
just gets kind of hairy that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any real right or wrong way to do it. I don't mind races trying to figure it out or putting like or having a pro start versus an amateur start.
Yeah.
I personally still feel a part of it all if I'm starting in a different wave than the pros
Right.
started. But I do know like
Yeah.
BWR or Mid South. Couple of the times I've raced that, it's like okay, let's just hang in the front group for as long as I can until I get blown off the back, and that's also really fun to do. That's just
Hmm.
it's just cool to like see where you stack up in that whole thing. So I get both of it, both
Yeah.
sides of it, but for especially for Sea Otter, I was happy to be in the age group category
Yeah.
that I was.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, uh, la-
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that I for Unbound, I think Sea Otter it makes a ton of sense because we're talking about a mountain bike race with single track
yeah,
and Unbound and these other gravel races where it's quite a wide open road. You could make the argument that hey, why don't we just all start together? But people were bringing up the fact that there were a lot of crashes happening last year in the first 20 miles at Unbound. And I mean, splitting up the starts and having there be a pro men's start, a pro women's start, and then an amateur start. It's not even that people don't know how to handle their bikes. I mean, I think everybody up there in the first 500 probably knows how to handle their bikes decently enough. It's just that it's too many people trying to be in one small area at one time. And when there's that many people on bikes in that small of an area, crashes are going to happen.
Yeah. What's the starting field for Unbound for the 200? I mean, it's got to
I
be
don't know.
several thousand, right? Like
Yeah,
a couple
two or three
thousand.
thousand or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
I just don't see logistically how that
Mhm.
works cleanly.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
our big gravel race in Michigan here is Barry Roubaix, and we have that's probably it's 4,000+ racers,
Hmm.
but that's across four different distances.
Yeah.
But they have to separate it out into waves, just
Yeah.
because I don't. Yeah, it becomes a safety thing.
Hmm.
Um, so and then it kind of, and we're not really the ones to have this conversation, but like you start separating pro and amateurs, and then it's that whole conversation of, well, do you separate women and men starting?
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and so yeah, there's and I actually don't mind, like I said, different races doing different things. Like I don't think there has to
Hmm.
be an answer.
Right.
It can be like, let's try this and see what happens, and if it
Yeah.
works, it works. If not, um, I mean, certainly you're not going to split up the competition amongst each other. So as
Hmm.
long as that still is there, then yeah, it doesn't bother me to start somewhere else other than what the pros start at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so what is so Unbound is the next race on the
Mhm.
Lifetime series. Is that your
Yeah.
next race then?
I will do Gravel Locos in Hyco,
Yeah.
Texas, which is 2 weeks before. And I think that I've done that the last 2 years, and I think that it is a good kind of little tune-up race for, I call it a little tune-up race, but it's 150 miles, and a lot of really fast riders show up. So I don't know if little is the right word there, but um, it's a good tune-up race for Unbound because it's quite similar terrain, sort of the same sort of rolling hills that Unbound has. It's a long race too. It's 150 miles, so it's just 50 miles short of the Unbound distance. We're talking about probably a 7 to 7.5 hour day as opposed to a 10-hour day. So it won't take you quite as long to recover from, which is a good thing if we need to turn around within 2 weeks and do Unbound. But it's similar terrain. A lot of the same riders show up for it, so I think it's a good tune up for Unbound.
Yeah. How many years have you done Unbound? Did you do? I mean, you've done it. Obviously, you've done it, or have you done it before the whole Lifetime series? Um,
Hmm. Yeah, this will be my fourth year doing it.
okay.
I did it for the first time in 2018, and then I did it in 20, they didn't have it in
Mm-hmm.
2020, and I did it in 2021, 2022, and
And
then
then,
I'll do it
sure.
this year. Yeah.
How do you, in looking at your calendar, um, do you look at some of these races and say, I mean, all the Lifetime series races are important, but
Hmm.
do you separate them out a little bit and say this is my A Lifetime series race, or this is not as important, or I see myself this kind of race fitting myself better than this race? How do you separate those out?
Yeah, I do separate them. There are some races, even though points wise, every single Grand Prix race is weighted equally. So you could make the argument that you should just, go for every single race with an equal amount of preparation. And
Sure.
I I think some courses suit me better, and then there's some Grand Prix races that I think that are they're just more prestigious than the other ones. So Unbound, I think, regardless of the Grand Prix or not, a good result at Unbound is career changing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas I don't know, a good result at Crusher
Schwanigan.
and the Tusher, it's like it, it it's something. It's, don't get me wrong, it's
Yeah.
it's impressive, and it's definitely helpful for your career as a professional cyclist, but it's not like if you win Crusher in the Tusher versus if you win Unbound. I mean, if you win Unbound the next year, you're going to have a six-figure contract. If you win Crusher in the Tusher, maybe you get five grand from a sponsor that wouldn't have otherwise sponsored you next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's different. So the two races that I am really targeting hard this year are Unbound and Leadville. And I think that they both suit me well. Leadville probably a little less so because I've lived at low altitude my whole life on the East Coast. But I think that I actually respond decently to altitude when I go to altitude. And if I spend some time in Colorado before the race, I think that I can be well acclimated for Leadville. And I think that of the 7 Grand Prix races in the series this year, I think that the two most prestigious races in the series are Unbound and Leadville.
Yeah, I see that for sure. I Big Sugar's kind of getting there, I feel like, but
I I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years Big Sugar is on the same level
mhm.
as Unbound and Leadville. Big Sugar, I think the first year that they had Big Sugar was
Like,
they were gonna have it in 2020, but they couldn't. I think
yeah.
the first year they had it was 2021.
Yeah, so
That's
like
fairly new.
it doesn't have the history or the
Hmm.
longevity as Unbound or Leadville, but I
Yeah.
mean, I look at someone like Paige Onweller, who was first year doing Lifetime last year, and that
Hmm.
win, I feel like her win last year at Big Sugar changed her career for sure. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that if I mean, who knows what would have happened and who knows what was going on behind the scenes with, her contracts and everything. But I mean, you could argue that had she not won Big Sugar, she wouldn't have her Trek contract right now.
I think that I wouldn't be surprised if that's
Hmm.
100% true. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you mentioned it, and I do want to ask, like, um, so I think the end of last year, Ted King was doing some podcasts with just a bunch of gravel people, and he would ask them about like the state of gravel, and
Hmm.
which is an interesting and kind of vague thing to ask. But you being now a part of it for several years, racing on
Hmm.
the highest level for several years, and then experiencing the whole Lifetime series last year, which I think overall Lifetime and other brands and everything would consider it a success. This year, it seems like it's
Hmm.
starting with a lot of momentum. Um, yeah, like how do you see it being a part of the competition, being part of the racing, being part of all this? You had mentioned like the competition is getting more fierce and faster and faster. Um, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Hmm.
Like, talk to me a little bit about where you stand in this whole state of gravel, or I guess Lifetime. What are
Yeah.
your feelings on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to talk about the competition, let me give some concrete examples because some people listening to this, if they're not as tuned in to the gravel scene, they may not realize how insane the competition has gotten over the past couple of years. So I'll use Unbound as an example
Sure.
because everybody knows Unbound. When I first did Unbound in 2018, my finishing time was I think 11 and a half hours. And just to give some context to that race, I blew up catastrophically in the second half of the race. I bonked, I cramped. There was a period where I was on the side of the road at some farmer's house for 10 minutes just sitting there. I was making no progress on the course. I was literally just sitting at a farmer's house and he had some water. I think that was at mile 170 or something. And it was an absolute, I was just dragging myself to the finish line, right? Pretty miserable day,
Yeah.
11 and a half hours. And I finished ninth place that year,
Okay.
right?
All right.
All right. So the next time I do it, 2021, I get multiple flat tires, but they don't cost me a lot of time because I don't have to put a tube in. I just plug it. Um, and I have a better race, but I was fading quite a bit towards the end. I think my finishing time was low 11. I think it might have been. maybe it was under 11, 10:50 or something. Um, and that got me 12th place, right?
Okay.
So I go faster, but I get a worse
Yeah.
result. Now let's talk about last year. Last year, I have a flawless race. I don't have any flat tires. I don't bonk. I don't cramp. I have this super great pacing strategy. Everything goes according to plan. I have the highest power output that I've ever done at Unbound, and I get 25th place.
Oh man.
So it just sort of puts all this, and this is not an isolated thing with Unbound. This is every single race I'm doing. Now this happened at Mid South. This happens at Sea Otter. It's every single race. I've got a higher power output, a higher average speed, a faster finishing time, and a worse placing on the results sheet. So I mean, it can be a little bit frustrating, I guess, but at the same time, I guess it's it's cool to be part of a growing sport. And when a sport is growing like this, that's just that's just what's going to happen. You may stay at your same level or even improve, but relative to all these new riders that are entering, it may seem like you're doing worse. But I don't know. It's kind of fuel for the fire, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, even though it's frustrating, it's still motivating in a way. Um,
I would say so. Yeah.
yeah. So it's not frustrating where it just keeps you from wanting to even line up with the
hmm
competition. Um,
hmm
but yeah, those diminishing returns that it could be. It seems like the harder you work,
hmm
the less you're the less you're seeing. But yeah, I mean, and then from my perspective, it's just wild to see. I mean, you start seeing all these names that you don't recognize,
hmm
and I know Sea Otter, for instance, had a few new names. Some of them in the Lifetime series, some of them maybe some of them not, but
hmm
um, you get a lot of like international riders coming and taking it on. I mean, it's like last year's Unbound with
hmm
Ivar's, yeah,
Ivar Slick.
yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
I think most people are like, who the heck is this guy? But obviously, I mean, he was strong, and but I wonder if you're going to get more and more and more of that, and then the competition is just going to kind of
Yeah.
grow and grow. But as a spectator, as a fan of the sport, it's fun for me to
hmm
kind of look
hmm
back or on the sideline and just watch it all happen. I get curious about people like you who are in it and how you're
hmm
feeling as it's going on. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I it's both. I mean, it's a little bit frustrating, but like I said, I try not to let that. I try to let it, be a motivator, not not. If anything, I think that it's increasing my level of motivation, not decreasing it. For example, I got back from Sea Otter and I was like, well, I need more fitness, so I got to do something with this month and a half I have before Unbound, and I'm entering quite a big training block that I probably otherwise wouldn't.
yeah.
So yeah, using it as motivation for sure. And I think the reason why we're seeing this is because there is more money in if you're a US domestic pro, like if you're at that domestic pro level where you can't quite make it to the world tour in road or you can't quite make it to the World Cup in mountain bike, you're at the level where you can be a professional in the US. If you want to make money, you need to be in gravel. You're going to make less money if you're in road, and you're going to make way less money if you're in mountain bike. And that's just the reality of the situation right now for whatever reason. I mean, it's the way the industry is going. But if you are a domestic level pro in the US and you want to make a career out of it, you need to be in gravel.
Yeah. Which I think is great. And I'm glad that American cycling has that opportunity for American athletes. Um,
hmm
I I hope that the growth of that, it's it grows correctly. And I mean,
Hmm.
I see things as like, as an amateur going into, say, like, um I don't know, SBT gravel or something, and the cost to get into that race is like ridiculous for
Yeah.
myself, like,
Hmm.
and so I don't know. That's just an example of, like, sometimes I hope that these races aren't getting too big or too popular or too whatever. But then also on the other side, I know that's giving opportunities for riders like you to make a living, and so I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic as well. Um,
Yeah. I think that, you know, gravel has been grassroots for so long, and a lot of people don't want to see that side of gravel go. Like when the UCI started getting involved with, adding a gravel world championship and this, gravel world series, a lot of people were up in arms. I can see both sides. I don't have, I would say I don't really have a super strong opinion either way. I, I'm kind of I'm kind of fine to just let gravel evolve into what it'll be. I don't necessarily need to see it stick to what it's been for the last, I don't know, 10 years or
yeah.
however long you think gravel has been around. Some people think that it's been around since the dawn of cycling because people have been riding bikes on dirt roads ever since bikes were invented. So,
I mean, I think as long as gravel has been around, it's always been evolving, right? Like,
mhm,
I don't think
yeah.
it's ever stopped, and it's been growing or changing, or whatever. So yeah, there is definitely more room for it to grow or change or evolve, and yeah, I think that's exciting for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, kind of going back to the competition thing, I was just thinking, uh, if the ceiling hadn't been pushed further and further with other athletes, then your ceiling wouldn't. I mean, so it's giving you motivation, but it's also pushing your
Hmm.
ceiling further and further. And
Yeah.
the same output is not going to get you eighth place anymore. So you yourself have to become a better athlete and a better racer.
Yeah.
So
I
it's not
think,
just motivation, it is actually making you a stronger rider,
right.
even though on paper you're looking at the results may not look that way, but
Hmm.
some of the data might. But
Hmm.
yeah, if that ceiling wasn't pushed, then maybe you yourself would never have gotten to be,
Yeah.
your full potential, I guess.
I think that you're absolutely right about that. I think it's pushing everyone's ceiling. I think that, let's just say in a hypothetical, um, I don't know, in an alternate universe, people just trained on their bike, but they weren't racing each other. They just were training to see how strong they could get for some reason, and they weren't competing with anyone. I mean, there are people like that who don't compete with anyone. They just see how strong they can get on their bike. I don't think that people would be nearly as strong as they are than when they have competition around them, or they have the idea that there's a competition coming up that they need to train for. I think that pushes people to limits that they don't know they have. I'm going to make an analogy to kind of extreme sports like skateboarding or BMX, or I don't know, pick your extreme sport, but the progression of those sports, it's completely different than endurance sports, obviously, because we're talking about a sport where it's almost all skill, whereas endurance sports are almost all uh, you know uh, aerobic fitness,
Physiology or something. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's a skill component, obviously, in gravel racing and mountain bike racing, but it's primarily fitness. But it's interesting seeing the progression in a sport like skateboarding or BMX or any extreme sport where, we're talking about, let's just say, for example, like I don't know, a double backflip or something. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that's completely insane. Like no one can do a double backflip. And now it's like, and when the first double backflip was
Yeah.
landed, it was the craziest thing that's ever happened. And now there's 50 riders in the world that can do that. And they're doing stuff way crazier than that. And constantly seeing this is pushing those sports and they're constantly progressing, and you can never compare one year to a previous year because the level just keeps getting higher and higher and higher and higher. Um, when you now you could argue that the same thing is happening in endurance sports, although I will say that in endurance sports we're talking about there's some sort of physiological ceiling that humans have to contend with. You
Yeah.
can't there's only so many watts per kilo that a human is even capable of, right? And eventually we're going to hit that ceiling
Yeah,
if we haven't already, but
eventually, but I mean it's the same. It's like the 4 minute mile back in the
mhm,
day, and that was
right.
a once that was broken, no one thought it could be broken, and then some guy broke it, and then it just was like a
Yeah,
bunch of people broke it within the next year. Um, and
exactly.
I think that's
It's like if you know it's possible, then
yeah.
it's like, well, I'd go get it.
Well,
Yeah, you know.
that's the the competition or the mental component of it all. Um, take that away, I think the human body is only capable of so much, but bring
Mhm.
that mental component to it or the
Yeah,
competition or whatever, then it's like the human body can. There's a great book called
right.
Endure that kind of looks at all
Mhm.
of these different things. But I think about that with the 2 hour marathon,
Yeah.
and I feel like it was an experiment, right? It was more of a,
Mhm.
can the human body actually do that? And even though it's outside of a racing situation, even though it's like all the help was given to him as he's riding, as he's running, as he's doing this, but just for other humans to know that it's possible, it might
Mhm.
be the only way for it to actually happen again in a racing situation or a
Yeah.
different situation. So yeah, I mean that the ceiling just keeps creeping further and further, and we just keep meeting it. Hopefully,
Mhm. Right. Yeah, yeah. I think we're going to see a sub 2 hour marathon in a race scenario in probably within the next 10 years.
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're already so close at this point. They're
so close.
201, I think, is the world record. 201 something is
Yeah,
the
and
is the
change.
world
Yeah,
record. I mean, it might be by Eliud Kipchoge who did that sub two
yeah,
hour experiment, or it might be by another runner, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in the next 10 years.
yeah. Incredible. Um, well, cool, Dylan. I've taken plenty of your time. I really appreciate your uh, perspective on all of this,
Mhm.
and then also just like chatting about Sea Otter. I mean, it was fun for me, and I
Yeah.
was hoping to find someone like you to just kind of chat about the race and the course and everything, and yeah, it worked out perfect. So appreciate it. Um,
Yeah.
good luck on your big training block as you work up toward Unbound. Be
Mhm.
sure to watch and see how it all is gonna go on. And I don't know. I don't have any big races, so I probably won't see you around, but maybe. I don't
Okay.
know. I do
Cool.
have
Well, I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
yeah, thank you.